actual medicine that we are using to deliver to the patient has been diluted so much that the possibility of even one molecule of gold existing in the final product are infinite, which means that we've diluted the medicine so much that there isn't any gold left in it. However, when we deliver the homeopathic preparation of dilute gold to an animal or a human being, it produces profound physiological change. As a matter of fact, interestingly enough, gold in its organic metallic state is inert. And, back in the day, when knucklehead M.D.s didn't know what else to do for arthritis, which, by the way, is one of the easiest things in the world to treat, they used to inject gold into people's joints because gold was inert and it had no chemical reactions inside the body. They use it as kind of like a solidifying agent for the joint, right? However, gold in its metallic state is inert in the physical body, but when you prepare gold into a homeopathic medicine, it is a profound antidepressant. It is a profound antidepressant. And so when you prepare something homeopathically, you alter its properties, but the preparation process apparently seems to break the laws of physics as we know it, as we know them, because really there should be no more material substance left in the dilution, but yet the dilutions produce remarkable change consistently, whether it's given to an animal or a human being every time. And the naysayers of homeopathy say that, oh, this is all just placebo, and it's nonsense, and they couldn't be further from the truth.
Could it be because the frequency of whatever it is that you've diluted has the potency in it as well?
Well, we don't know, and there are a lot of theories as to how the homeopathic dilution works. There's an electromagnetic gate theory. There's a resonance theory. I mean, there's all these ideas that people have, but nobody knows. It's kind of like gravity. Homeopathic medicines are like a gravity. We can see that they produce an effect. We can measure gravity, but we have no earthly idea what causes it. I mean, not even Einstein knew what caused gravity. String theory and all these theories about what caused, nobody knows.
But why the level of dilution? How did that come to be a standard?
That happened because back in the 1800s, when homeopathic medicine was born, and it was brought to life by a German physician named Samuel Hahnemann. And in the 1800s, medicine, as it was practiced in the world, was pretty horrific. I mean, that was back in the day when they were bleeding people, when they were giving people large doses of mercury. And, it was heroic medicine. It was kind of the rise of heroic medicine, and the treatment were often worse than the illness was. And there were a group of physicians who recognized that the use of all of these nasty drugs and very caustic pharmaceutical agents were killing people. And, the cure was worse than the disease. And yet something had to be done. Something had to be done to end human suffering. So Dr. Hahnemann in Germany started experimenting with making the medicines weaker and weaker, making them more and more dilute. And what he found paradoxically was, as he made the medicines more and more dilute, they had better and better action when they were applied correctly. It was really fascinating.
It is fascinating.
The whole kind of recognizing that the law of similars, number one, existed. Nobody knew that before Hahnemann came along. So not only did he discover the law of similars, but he also discovered this law of serial dilution, serial dynamization, or potentization, as it's called with homeopathy. Hahnemann was kind of like the Einstein of medicine back in the day.
Very, very exciting. Now, there's 2,500 licensed naturopaths in the USA, at least as of the publication of your book.
Yeah, there's 4,000 now, 4,000 right now. This is 2011. And next year in 2012, it's going to be about between 3,500 and 4,000 licensed naturopathic doctors in the entire country. And, that's a drop in the bucket.
That's not much.
No, it's not much. I mean, it's 300 million people, right? We are an eeny, weeny, teeny profession. However, we're like the people that just invented the wheel. I mean, can you imagine, or I think perhaps a better metaphor is the naturopathic doctors of today are like the abolitionists in, the antebellum South. Back in the day, after 300 years of slavery, there were, in fact, a handful of people saying, you know what? Slavery's not right. It's a bad thing. And they started making noise about it, and they were a minority, but they had the truth. And because they had the truth, their movement started to grow. Now, look, it took a couple of 100 years for that whole thing to really grasp a hold. And for goodness sake, the Civil War, it resulted in the Civil War. And now, slavery has been abolished. Well, naturopathic physicians are in a similar position right now because our message is as radical right now as the whole notion of slavery is a bad thing was back in the days of slavery.
Have you heard of this host on television? I think her name is Juliana Rancic. She has been an commentator. She and her husband Bill have had their own show, and she just went through a double mastectomy a few days ago.
Yeah.
And one of the things I found yesterday was that she had implants put in her breasts.
Yeah.
Now, I know we're not talking about this necessarily, but people don't correlate putting these type of materials in your body to the effect of causation or facilitating an outbreak of cancer. But I just find it interesting that they're all talking about the double mastectomy and she had to do it to save her life, and God knows what else she's been through, chemo or whatever else she may have to go through still, and cutting out her lymph nodes. And I just think it's very ripe to talk about something else in your book that really upset me. I want to kind of cut to this for just a moment, just because she just got her double mastectomy.
Yeah.
On page 117, you write that when an oncologist prescribes a chemotherapy drug, he or she gets a piece of the action, and chemotherapy is the only category of prescription drugs where this is allowed. I can't believe it.
Well, you better believe it, because medicine since, I don't know, more or less 60 or 70 years ago has turned into a for-profit juggernaut here in the United States.
Well, I see that part, but what you wrote, how do you know that that's true?
Well, I'll tell you how I know that that's true. I'll look up the reference for that right now. There was a study that was published a number of years ago. I'm going to try to pull up the reference right now.
Thank you.
It's a 12-year study. They looked at adults who had developed cancer. Over the course of 12 years, this was a gigantic study, and this was published in the Journal of
Clinical Oncology.
Clinical Oncology, published in the Journal of Clinical Oncology, and I'll find the date here in a second. And the 12-year study, published in the Journal of Clinical Oncology, and in the world of clinical oncology, it doesn't get any better than that. That's the gold standard, right? And here were the results of the study. They conclusively proved that adults who developed cancer and were treated with chemotherapy was 97% ineffective. It didn't work. It did not work. 97% of the time. And I think the study was published in 1994. 97% of the time, chemotherapy doesn't work. And yet it's still prescribed, and chemotherapy clinics are popping up all over the place. Well, how can this be? It's because chemotherapeutic drugs are the only classification of drugs that the doctor gets a piece of the action. So, the hospital buys the drug for cisplatin for $3,000. They sell it for $12,000. Insurance pays $9,000. And the hospital and the doctor split the difference. And it is the only reason that chemotherapy is still prescribed. Listen, if Ford Motor Company invented an automobile which blew up 97% of the time that you drove it off the lot, it wouldn't be around much longer, would it? No, because Ford does not monopolize the automotive industry. But the M.D.s do. The pharmaceutical companies do. We do not have a free medical market. So they can do whatever the heck they want, and we have lost the war on cancer. 100 years ago, cancer was the number 2 killer. 50 years ago, when Richard Nixon started the war on cancer, it was the number 2 killer. After $1 trillion of research and development, it's still the number 2 killer.